Hey, everybody, welcome into the Ben Maynard program. Thanks for being here. As a reminder, we'll take care of some housekeeping to get things started. The program is available on multiple podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Among others, just search the Ben Maynard program and choose your option. I like to direct everybody towards Buzzsprout because that's where my website is. Of course, if you can't resist this right here, all of this good stuff, then you can watch on YouTube. And if you are watching on YouTube, I ask that you please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and leave a comment. I like comments. I'm not getting enough of those. Last but not least, follow me on Instagram, simply Ben Maynard Program. So there are plenty of ways to take in this show for your dancing and listening pleasure. With that, I'll recap the last episode. That was the Bro Show. That was where I had my brothers in, my brother Jim and my brother Chuck. And we just talked about life. We talked about our relationship. We talked about growing up together, growing up not together. It was some really good stuff. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to check it out. Please do so. It really is some good stuff. And it's a little, we let you take a peek into our lives a little bit. Okay. So with that, as you can see, I've got two gentlemen here, one to my right, one to my left. These gentlemen, I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And they're members, or we are members of men's Bible study group at our church. And I have so much respect for these guys. And I have to my right, Coach Bob Mount, and to my left, Coach Scott Smith. And with that, I want to say thank you very much, guys, for taking time out of your day to be on the program.
Honored to be here. I'm excited to hear what your discussion leads today.
Right.
Just waiting to hear the first question.
Oh, is that what it is? Well, before I get into the first question, I'm going to do something that is so very unprofessional, and I'm going to walk away from the table because I left a pair of glasses across the room, and I can't see anything that I wrote down here. I can't see my notes. So take a time out, everybody. I'll be right back. And you guys talk amongst yourselves. Yeah, that's great, right? That's great. Walk away from the camera, right in the middle of recording. Oh, so much better. So much better. Yeah. So, I guess where I'll start. Yeah, I guess where I'll start is talk about the nature of your association together, and how long have you guys known one another, and when was it that you first met?
I met Bob in 1991. Bob was head football coach at West Covina High School. It was his first year of coaching as a head coach. And it was my first year coaching at Wilson High School in Hacienda Heights. So we had both gone through preseason, and now it was a first league game, and it happened to be at our place at Wilson. And I knew Bob was a new coach, but I didn't know anything about him. And it was my first year coach, and we played what we like to today call the toilet bowl. And the reason why we say that is he was horrible and I was worse. So we played each other. It was 6-0 going to the fourth quarter. We're driving, and we're going to get beat if we don't score. And a field goal wasn't going to do it. So on fourth down, we went for it, and we ran a middle screen, and Bob happened to blitz us. I think it was fourth down. Maybe it was third down, but I don't remember. And we got lucky and scored. And the guy that caught the ball is Stevie Martin, not the comedian. And we actually kicked the extra point where Bob missed his, and we won 7-6. So I shook hands with Bob and talked to him after the game, just cordial things that coaches do.
Right.
And then kind of let it be. So in 92, I got a job over at Ayala High School. And Ayala at that time was growing football-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So it was also growing academically, so we needed teachers. Well, I remember Bob, and I understood that he was a good teacher. I understood he was a Christian man from people I knew. So I called Bob, and this is out of character for me. Normally, I don't go out on it like that. So I called Bob, and Bob doesn't know me, but except to our experience coaching. And I try to recruit Bob over. Now, you have to understand about Bob Mount. He is West Covina. His bloodlines, his dad was principal there. His brothers went there. He's blue and white all the way through. And so I had to convince Bob to give up tenure to come over to a school as a probationary. Were you probationary or temporary? Probationary?
Yeah.
Give up tenure, come over. And I said, but you're going to like this program. And in football, your strength is the ability of your coaches to coach. And he was a coach. And that staff, there was probably, what, 4 head coaches?
Previous head coaches.
Yeah. So I recruited Bob, and Bob just didn't know. And I called him on a Sunday. It happened to be the Sabbath. And I called him and said, this is going to be a go, but my wife got upset at me. She said, what are you doing calling these guys and recruiting them? I said, well, we want a good football program. So we talked, and I said, Bob, it's a leap of faith, but I made it first, coming from Wilson over to Ayala. And I moved over to Chino Hills High School, and Bob actually moved over to Chino Hills. And that's where our friendship began. So Bob and I have coached against each other and coached with each other over the course of their career.
Let me ask you, when those Ayala days, was that Coach Pascarella?
Pascarella.
Yeah. Okay.
It was, to be honest, those years were the best years that school's ever had. We went to the finals 3 times.
Yes.
In the 90s. You were on the staff the year we went to the finals?
Well, I think in answer to Ben's question, our acquaintance goes back even further. When you were at Wilson High School and I was at West Covina High School, and I always knew Scott Smith was the coach. I knew you by name.
Right.
I know that we'd also attended several football clinics, and I knew at that time that you must be a good coach because you were always attending the last session of those football clinics, and I watched you diligently taking notes those years, and I thought, this guy really must know football. But so other than to shake your hand at the end of the game, and by your lifestyle, I thought I didn't really know you much until your call to me that Sunday afternoon was very pivotal. I was at a point where I was restless at West Covina. I just wanted maybe a change, and had initiated some inquiry about some jobs out at Ayala. And then you called that Sunday, and I knew you were a fellow believer, and so you carried a lot of credence in what you shared with me. But at that point in my decision process, it just gave me real peace of mind that you'd been through a similar situation. And so, I said, okay. And I pulled the plug and left West Covina after been a student there, and a family, of course, growing up in that area. My dad was a school board member. He wasn't a principal of anything, but to leave your roots in a city like West Covina, again, it was our conversation that gave me that real peace of mind that this was an open door from the Lord. And I look back now, having spent another 20 some years at West Covina or at Ayala, that it was just the absolute right move at the time.
Right. Ben, you need to understand as a teacher, when you give up tenure and going out to be a probationary at another school, it is truly a leap of faith. And if God was directing me, and in my family, my wife didn't want to move, and I was the only one that wanted to move, but she was nice enough to follow my direction. But it's truly a leap of faith, because that's job security with tenure, and we gave it up.
Right. So, so Bob, you were and Scott, you were both coaching prior to you meeting one another in '91. You were coaching and teaching also, right? Scott, you were a special ed teacher,
right?
And Bob, you were a history teacher, correct?
History and psychology.
History and psychology. Okay.
So, as far as my teaching career, I taught 38 years, not as quite as long as Bob, but I taught 38 years. The last 34 years were in special ed, which is a normal amount, because today's longevity is about 5 years in the field.
Wow.
But I dealt with kids that had Tourette's, Down syndrome. I've had cerebral palsy. I had learning disabilities. And what kept me going through it, and people wonder, how did you do it? Because you have IEPs, you have different hats you have to wear. I just try to remember every day that I walked in there that God doesn't make mistakes. And the kids that are disabled and all are there for a reason. So I knew that God was taking care of me as far as what I did for a living. And I enjoyed it.
Right.
I mean, what's that saying, Bob, about work? If you
Find a job that you enjoy doing, you'll never work a day in your
right.
life.
And I loved coaching and I loved teaching and
Yeah.
health concerns are, and I don't know if we'll address it later, but health concerns are what caused me to quit coaching.
Right. Well, and I always say when it comes to work, if Mondays are ruining your Sundays, it's time to change jobs. But you know, so that one game, the toilet bowl, was that the only game that you would actually coached against one another?
No.
Oh, okay.
I had spent, well, to go back in terms of the education, now, I didn't start out to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I had my senior year in college an opportunity to sign a contract with the Dallas Cowboys and then intended to pursue a professional football career. But because of an injury, that door got shut, and I wasn't real sure what I wanted to do. I had a degree in psychology from Cal State Northridge, and what do you do with that? And so I thought, okay, Lord, at that point I was mature enough spiritually. I was asking the Lord for direction, and I was attending John MacArthur's Grace Community Church, and a lot of the guys that were in the college group were going to Talbot Seminary. And I thought, well, I don't know that I want to be a minister, but the curriculum intrigues me. So I applied and I got accepted. So without really knowing what the end result would be and how the Lord would use that, I finished up my master's in theological studies. And at that point, you ask the question again, what do I want to do?
Right.
Well, I had been teaching swim lessons out in the San Fernando Valley, and the guy that was the head swim coach, he said, hey, Bob, I need an assistant. And one thing led to another, and I became the head swim coach there. And during that time, it gave me some good experience. But the guy that had started swimming at West Covina, a man named Hervey Gotro, was going to step down, and he had reached out to me through one of my brothers and said, hey, Bob, would you like to take over as the head swim coach? And I thought, yeah, I might be interested. So I drove out to West Covina and talked to Hervey. And same day I'm on campus, the guy that had been my position coach when I played at West Covina, Tim Branshaw, who's now the head coach, he finds me and he says, hey, Bob, I got a position as assistant on the varsity staff. Would you be interested in that? And I thought, wow, those are two pretty good opportunities. And
Sure.
so I called Cal Poly Pomona, and they fortunately took most of my master's units toward my teaching credential. So I spent a year finishing up my credential and then went up to Azusa Pacific and got another master's in education, but then started what turned out to be a 40-year career in teaching. And I look back now and I thought, with no regrets, what a great profession.
Right.
But to get back to, again, with Scott, he was coaching at Wilson. I was coaching at West Covina, and we had several encounters during that time. But again, it wasn't until in the 90s where I got to meet him personally. And because of that, we've had such a rich friendship. And I think the magnet there has been our walk with the Lord.
So, in Bob's journey, Bob explained to you his journey. My journey was, I played football at Pacifica High School in Garden Grove.
Okay.
And our head coach was Art Mahalik. And if you look up in the NFL encyclopedia, you'll see he played for the 49ers and Eagles. And he is responsible for inventing the face mask. He broke Otto Graham's nose in a game, and Otto Graham got together with Paul Brown and invented the face mask. So Art Mahalik was a professional wrestler also, and would wrestle down in the Orange County Fairgrounds.
Oh, great.
He was about 6'5", 245. So he would, before a game, he'd get up there with these big paws. And in fact, his hands were so big you could drop a quarter sideways through his ring.
Oh, man.
So I just remember listening to him and he firing you up. And I thought, you know what? This is what I want to do for a living. I want to be a teacher coach. So in 10th grade, I knew what I was going to do. And the Lord has directed me the whole time. I didn't know I was going to end up in special ed, but he used me in that avenue and he directed me through.
That's great. That's great. So let me ask you this. Okay, so you were a swim coach. That was before football coach, or did they kind of happen simultaneously?
Yes and no.
Okay.
My summer job was to lifeguard in the
Right.
pool that I was lifeguarding. I had a little age group swim team, and so
Hmm.
that was my initial entrance into the aquatics until I was done with football. And then that became, while I was at Talbot, my full time job. I was teaching swim lessons to Rita Curtis Swim School out in the San Fernando Valley, and her specialty was little babies. And I remember I had a little 6-month-old that the parents wanted
Wow.
their baby to be water safe, but it was at that facility that it was AAU swimming at the time.
Okay.
And Nick Rodinoff in San Fernando Valley Aquatics was the name of the team. And he was such a great mentor, and I learned a lot about coaching swimming at the time. Of course, having played football all my life, I already had that background. So when the opportunities at West Covina opened up, they just had to be in God's providence, the right timing to get me into the career that I was best suited for.
Okay. So now my audience knows that I was a coach as well. I was a baseball coach for many years at all levels, through little league, high school. Um, so I want to ask you guys about, and because we're dealing with, and it can happen on a grand level as well, but when we're talking high school, we're talking youth, 14 to 18 years old generally. What was your coaching style? How did you approach that? How did you approach coaching, and how did you approach getting your message across to the kids? And let me refine that question a little bit. I've always believed in motivation rather than intimidation. And we all know football's a pretty rough sport. Uh, Coaches tend to get really loud, vocal, and way back when, at times could be physical with the players too. So I just want to ask about your approach and where you looked at, how you approached your coaching style, I should say.
Well, first of all, your term coach isn't maybe what it should be called.
Mhm.
I think that Bob and I were both teachers of. Bob taught defensive line play. I taught offensive line play.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I always used to say I am a teacher of baseball. So
Right.
continue. I'm sorry, Scott.
So with the in high school football, what happens is all the really skilled players and pretty boys go to the receivers and running backs and quarterbacks.
Mhm.
The very aggressive kids end up on defense, and the offensive line got the leftovers. So you had kids that didn't know. So, like, if I'm going to teach pass protection, I needed to teach them the skills they needed to pass pro. If I'm going to teach them to pull, I had to teach them how to pull correctly. And on game night, when we didn't play well, a lot of times I looked at myself and said, maybe you didn't teach that right.
Right.
So, my mannerism was I didn't cuss on the field, and I didn't want my players to cuss. Yes, they cussed, and I would recall them on it, but I was enthusiastic, I think. I didn't belittle anybody. I was an encourager the best I could.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing, I think, was the fact that you had to teach them. Game night, I wanted them to be like Robotrons. I wanted them to just robotically go through what we had worked on all week, whether it's step formations and feet work and so forth. And so it was successful to me. Or it's been successful to me, and we've dealt with all kinds of Bob and I. We've dealt with all kinds of kids.
Right.
And what you ultimately hope as a coach is, besides them liking you, my number one goal was that I just wanted them to respect me.
Mm-hmm.
Your starters are going to like you because they start. The
Right.
backups may not like you because you don't play them, but I ultimately wanted them to respect me.
Well, I think bouncing off what you said, that as a coach, I think the better term is a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I think of the men that have had the greatest impact on my coaching style, and none of them were known for their so-called raise and scream and yell type of coaching. You think of a John Wooden, a Tom Osborne, Tom Landry, and those men were teachers. But having said that, there are times that I think you need to elevate the tone of your voice to get kids' attention. But if that becomes your style, they pretty soon turn you out because it's 24/7. those men, I think, were best known as teachers, and I thought that that was my job. And the motivation, and I would harken back to John Wooden. I was fortunate in high school that my high school principal was John Wooden's older brother, Maurice. My basketball coach had played for John Wooden at UCLA, so we, not knowing how famous a coach he would be at that time, had a strong John Wooden influence. And I remember he would come out and talk to us. But to me, his pyramid of success is the peace, the pinnacle of the peace of mind that you get of knowing that you did the best you could do to be the best you could be. And to me, it was all about preparation. And if I could prepare my athletes to be successful, whether you win or lose isn't part of that answer, but to do the best they could and being as best prepared. And how do you do that? I think you become a teacher in terms of skills and things like that.
And I think Bob will agree. Sometimes we go to the games and we hear the coaches yell out, "Block them." Well, block them or tackle them. Well, how do you block them? How does your kid block? Offensive line wise, how do you block? And if you just say block them and they don't have any technique, and when we studied film work, we'd watch some kids, they're poorly coached because they weren't taught properly what needed to be done.
It matters not what the sport is. There's a fundamental to playing that sport. There are fundamentals involved. Mm-hmm. And if you don't teach proper fundamentals, then there's a breakdown when it comes game time. Mm-hmm. They can't execute your game plan properly because they haven't been taught the proper fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And what you were saying, coaches, block them. That's great. I remember hearing way back when my son Jake was 5-6 years old, and he's playing soccer, and he wasn't very good at soccer, and he played for 4 years and he was done. Baseball was his sport, but I would hear his coach, get the ball. That's great. But what are you supposed to do with it after that? And that's where teaching comes in. Yeah. You have to teach. And I've always been really just hard about fundamentals, teaching the fundamentals. There's a right way to throw the baseball. There's a right grip to throw the baseball and all that kind of thing. And to what you were talking about, Bob, about Coach Wooden, he was so great and he broke everything down even another level to where he was showing, he had practice showing the players how to put their socks on and how to tie their shoes properly, because if they weren't wearing their socks properly, they would get blisters, which is going to take them out of a game or maybe not allow them to play another game. If they didn't have their shoes tied properly, now their shoes come untied during a game. Now you're stopping the game and you're interrupting momentum. So a lot of folks don't realize that, but you have to break it down to the very simplest aspects of all of it. And I think that's what good teaching, whether it's baseball, football, swimming, or teaching history or whatever other subject you might be encountering.
One thing along that line that I found very important, because as a teacher, it's important what you say and when you say it, because part of coaching is oftentimes you have to take something where the kid didn't do well. Mm-hmm. So there's the negative, but in addressing that, it's important to also deal with the positive. And a guy come over after exchange of the ball. Okay, this is what you did wrong, but this is what you've been doing right. And I'm not sure what order you say that. Maybe you start out, well, this is what you've been doing well, but this is what we need to get better. Mm-hmm. But at some point, you need the positive and the negative. And the illustration that really reinforces that is the guy that went on to become a Hall of Fame pitcher. And he's in a tight game. The count is 3-2. The bases are loaded. The manager calls timeout, walks out to the mound, and talks to him, gives him his advice. And the last thing he said before the manager walked off the mound is, whatever you do, don't throw the ball high and inside. So the last thing implanted into his mind was the negative, what not to do. And guess what he did? He threw the ball high and inside and walked in the winning run.
Yeah.
So from that, I learned that at some point, because you have to deal with that. That's the nature of coaching. Okay, so you did something wrong, but what do we do to get better? Or, okay, this is what you've been doing that's good, but here's what we need to do. And so you have to be very conscious of your teaching at that point. And it's not just raising the tone of my voice and yelling at them, because what does that mean?
I agree.
The principles that I used in coaching and being a special ed teacher made me a better coach because I had to simplify. So I always went by the principle KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
And don't make it too complicated. It's a kid's game on Friday night to play. So make it so they can play and not have to overthink. So that's what we try to do. And special ed made me break it down into smaller parts.
Mm-hmm. And your job as a coach is in football, you're playing Friday night. So your job primarily is Monday through Thursday. It's their job on Friday.
Right. But the understanding too is how many people the history teacher or English teacher only has to present her lesson in front of the class. Game night, we had to present our lesson in front of the crowd.
Right.
And so how well did the kids pick up the lessons you taught that week that we're going to put in front of a crowd? Not too many people want their hard work put out in front of a bunch of people to be evaluated.
Especially if you're on the losing end of that,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's the ultimate accountability. They write about you in the newspapers the next Saturday. So
Right. Yeah. So, how has, well, no, I'll get into that. When did you become a follower of Christ? When did Christ come into your life?
I was fortunate in that our family grew up in that traditional Christian home. We went to church very consistently. But like most people, there comes a time when you make a statement of faith. And I remember having gone to Green Oaks Boys Camp down in San Diego. I don't know if it's still there, but it was a weekend retreat. And they had all kinds of neat things that boys would like to do, one of which the highlight was horseback riding. But
Sure.
We were there Friday night, Saturday night. And of course, part of the program down there was they would do some kind of Bible message in the Friday and Saturday evening. Well, Saturday evening, since it's our last night there, they gave an invitation. Anybody that wants to accept Jesus as their Savior will come forward. A whole bunch of guys were going forward, and I looked at that and I thought, I don't want to do this because everybody else is doing it, peer pressure.
Right.
So I left the building and I went back to where our cabins were, and I was the only one there. And I remember kneeling down beside my bed and praying, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to invite you into my life. And when I got home Sunday, I told my parents what I'd done. And then we used to have Sunday evening services. And they encouraged me to go forward at that time and do the commitment of faith. And so I look at that very significant in my life. Did I know what it meant? No. But then that, I think, launches, like for most of us, the whole process of growing as a Christian in our faith and to the point where I am today. So, but because the fortunate thing, it was such at an early age, it's governed my philosophy of coaching, teaching, everything else in my life, because ultimately I want to please the Lord in what I do. And it's to Him that I'm accountable to, no one else.
Right.
And you were how old at that age?
I was 12 years old.
I should say.
Yeah.
Okay, 12. Okay.
Okay. For myself, it was kind of different. My mom has been married 4 times. So there's always men coming in and out of her life. But for her, at birth, she made us go to Sunday school every Sunday. So people say, you have a choice to accept Christ. I never felt I had a choice to accept Him. I was expected to go to church, expected to follow Him. In fact, there's a picture of me in Inglewood when I was a youth in the choir, and I can't sing a lick. So I don't know.
That's not what I hear, Scott. I hear you sing like a bird.
Yeah,
In fact, I may have you sing a little Silent Night for us at the end of this.
Good luck to you. Yeah. So what happened is, finally I get to high school, and I attended Calvary, or attended Cypress Park Baptist Church, but they had no church. But we met off at an elementary school off of Bloomfield in Los Alamitos.
Yeah, okay.
So the pastor there happened to be the father of two kids that played football for us, our quarterback and our defensive back. So they had a contest where they would bring in so many kids into the youth group, and the group that brought in the most kids won some kind of prize. So they recruited all of us football players. So I started attending the church, and then we asked our head football coach if we could put ichthus on our helmets, the fishes for Christ on our helmets. So we did that. And so I went to Cypress Park, and then there got baptized. I was baptized as a youth at Glenkirk Presbyterian Church in Glendora. So I was baptized there and started attending church and turned my life over to Christ in high school. And then it's so on behold that in 1970, or my senior year, we won the league for the first time ever in the school's history. And I don't know if the fishes helped, but it couldn't hurt.
The fish is great. That's it. The fish is great. So you probably touched on this a little bit, but how is being a Christian, how does that, or has it, or did it affect the way you approached teaching, or did it have any effect on the way you would approach teaching? And so I don't have to ask the backup question, and coaching as well. And that's for both of you, and I don't care who goes first.
Well, I think for me, as I said earlier, my ultimate motivation is to do those things that would honor the Lord. So
Right.
It just teaching became such a convenient, if that's the right word, easier way to. I viewed teaching as a ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I taught usually 5, maybe 6 periods times 35 potential kids in the classroom. Coaching football, we'd have rosters, 150, 200 kids swimming. We had the equal amount.
Right.
During the summer, we had summer camps going on. That's a huge venue of exposure to kids of just nothing else, living a lifestyle that's different. Scott and I both have had opportunities where former athletes come back to us, and we never had a one-on-one conversation about their relationship with God, but they saw something different. And they said, Coach, I remember because you never swore on the football field, and you did, and you did. And I thought, that's the kind of example that I think the Lord has called us to, that hopefully later on becomes maybe an avenue to talk directly about why I chose Jesus over all the different other alternatives as a lifestyle.
Right. There you go.
As far as coaching for myself, I always kept in the back of my mind, would my players want to play for me? Would I want my son to play for me?
Right.
And if I answered yes, then I must be doing what I wanted to. And then in the classroom, I tended to be the special ed kids advocate, because the parents wanted this learning disability fixed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a broken arm. It's not going to be fixed in 6 months.
Right.
It's with them for life. So we're going to learn how to compensate for their disability, find an occupation that they could do. And I felt that's where the Lord really used me. And, I constantly knew that I needed to be a positive attitude, because understand that if I'm teaching you the Pythagorean theorem and you can't do your times tables, how in the world can you expect a kid to do that? So I try to break it down and keep it simple for them.
I think maybe just to add to that,
sure.
When I first started teaching and coaching at West Covina, they had a Friday right before the game Bible study. I forget the group, Campus Life or something like that.
Sounds familiar.
And the guy that did it was great, and he had a good heart for the Lord. But he and I talked, and I said, this is great, but the timing's not so good, because the kids are either concentrating on what you're saying, which they should, because it carries eternal values,
yes,
and then they're losing their focus on the game, or they're still focused on the game and they're not hearing a word you say. Why don't we do it like on a Thursday night?
Right.
So we started an off-campus Bible study. Once I did it with football, the swimmers said, well, let's do it for swimming. And I think now, Ben, and answer your question, the greatest impact that I've had on kids during my coaching tenure have been those kids that attended the off-campus Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
Because you get to talk about eternal values, and it's often those kids that come back to me years later, because somebody once said that teaching is planting a seed. So you get to see the fruit of it. Somebody else may reap that, but when a kid comes back and, hey, Coach Mountain, I remember attending your Bible study and I became a Christian, those are the things that carry eternal values. It's not whether Scott won that toilet bowl and all that kind of stuff.
And that's still a stick in your craw. But look, I'm gonna admit something. I to what you're saying, I before my admission, I do believe that as a leader of youth, be it as a teacher or a coach, it's your responsibility. You can mold these little minds, and to set a good example is the least you can do. And I believed when it comes to sports, and we used to say this when I was coaching baseball, that if you can teach your players to be successful in baseball, you can teach that, they will learn to be successful in life. And it's not, success isn't based on wins and losses. It's based on how you conduct yourself as, and we're talking sports now, but it's based on how you conduct yourself on the field. Are you a sportsman? Are you always giving your best? Do you lift people up and not tear them down? Those types of things. I used to say to the kids, if someone comes up to the ball field and sees us playing someone else, I want them to have to go to the scorekeeper to find out who's winning or losing, because it doesn't matter how many we're winning by. I don't want anyone to be able to see by looking at your faces and your mannerisms on the field as to who's winning. I want you to be very professional up there, and we don't taunt people. We don't point fingers at them. We just go out there and take care of our business. And that's all. I think that's really all you can do, is set that example. But I'll go back to my admission. And, I changed a lot. When I started coaching, I was 22 years old. So though I knew the game, I didn't know maybe the best way to get the message across, to teach. I wasn't a teacher at that time. And I was not only raw, but I was rough. And I was rough on my players. Again, we're talking youth here. We're not talking adults. And I still remember one player. His name was Abel Torres, and I'll never forget it, because he was playing third base and he had made an error. Ball went under his legs, and I'm standing outside the dugout on the third base side, so I'm really close to him, and I just looked at him, and at this time I'm probably 23 years old, and I said, if you let another ball get past you, I'm going to kick your butt. And the fear that was on the look of fear on his face, at the time I didn't think about that, but a short while after I thought, gosh, how dare I do something like that? How could I do something like that? And you talked about one of the greatest things as a mentor, as a teacher, as a coach, is when a former student, a former player comes back and they have fond memories of playing for you. And I believe that's probably one kid that will never have a fond memory of playing for me. And I have had some kids, certainly since then, since I matured as a coach, as a teacher, that would want to come back and play for me again, or they would say nice things about me. They would talk about the great time that they had. and the things that they learn, whether it's baseball skills or life skills. So, but there's that one that still gets to me. It still gets to me to this day. It still bothers me.
There was a book that fortunately I read early in my career. It was called Season of Life, and it was written by a football coach. And in there's a encounter, and the coach gets asked the proverbial question that parents would ask a coach: "Hey, coach, how's your season going to go? Or how's your team going to do this year?"
Mm-hmm.
And his answer, Ben, was it changed my coaching philosophy. He says, "I don't know. Ask me in 10, 15 years if they go on to be good husbands, good fathers, good employees." And I thought, that's what we're after.
Yes.
And, and of course, we've made our mistakes along the way, and we've said things that were hurtful to kids and then regretted them later. But I think ultimately, what was our job? We wanted to prepare them for life afterwards, so that, how's your team going to do? I don't know. Ask me. And then when you get those kids that come back and tell you, boy, how gratifying that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so, did you ever, being a Christian, did you ever meet with any resistance when you're coaching football or even coaching swimming? Any of that happen? And
you tell the Ayala football story, and I'll tell the Ayala swim story.
Okay.
It's game day one day, and I'm teaching, and game day, I'm already a little bit uptight. I take it personal, and so I'm teaching my kids, and all of a sudden somebody came in. Somebody came in and said, "You need to go to the administrative office." I said, "Well, for what?" "Well, I don't know, but they need you up there."
Mm-hmm.
So, well, how long is it going to be? I don't know. I said, told my aide, "Okay, we'll take over. I got to go up there." So I walk in there, and there's Bob, and there's Mark Pasquella. There's all these coaches in this administrative office.
Okay.
And it's game day, and what's going on? I don't know. So in comes a district administrator, and they said, "From now on, you guys cannot pray before the game out in front, out in the field in front of the fans. You cannot pray. You cannot be led by a coach, correct? Am I right? Can't be led by a coach. Now, if a player wants to address and pray, you can, but you guys can't do it." What about the locker room? I don't even remember what the response. I was such in shock that you took me out of the classroom to bring me to a meeting to say that you can't pray before the game out in front of the fans.
Right.
And so, so we did it because that's what our district employee, the district boss said, you can't do it. We didn't do it. So go ahead with
I think that was 1998.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Okay.
And when I first started my first football season in 1977, our head coach led us as a team in the locker room with the Lord's Prayer, and it was okay. And I would do that with swimming. But times had changed, and they said, "Okay, coaches can't lead that because you're a public school employee, but kids can." But that leads to our Ayala experience with swimming. Right before the swim meet, I'd bring the whole team over, and I'd give them last-minute instructions. And I forget how the order, the kids would either do a team cheer or a team prayer, but it was student-led at that point by the captains. And I always was hopeful that some of the kids that got selected as captains were Christians, because then that would take over. And then oftentimes they would, as a legacy, the senior graduating class would say, "Okay," and then we bequeath so-and-so would be the person in charge of leading the team prayer. Well, apparently there was some people that were offended by that, even though it was student-led. And so wasn't the district administration, it was our principal came down and said, "You can't do it anymore." And I said, "Well, we're not doing it. The kids are." Well, apparently the one person at that point that the family was objecting to it wasn't the kid, but she felt alienated because she was the only one that wasn't participating in the team prayer. So I was told that to tell the captains that anybody that feels uncomfortable, they can be excused. Well, now you got one person walking away, and so that would obviously emphasize that person. So the next time they said, "Well, it can't be anybody could be excused. Anybody that would choose to pray can come over here." So, but the same thing happened. Everybody went over there, and the one person was isolated. And it just was increasing. And so I remember we were praying about it. How do we allow the kids to pray without alienating this particular person? But
Right.
our next swim meet is with our arch rival, the Chino Hills kids. And so our assistant coach and I gave our last minute coaching directions, and I had to officially disband the meeting. So as a public school employee, I wasn't associated with it. And if the kids wanted to, I couldn't tell them that, okay, now it's time for the team prayer. I just had to step away. So I'm standing with our assistant coach on the other side of the pool. Our kids that wanted to pray, I noticed all of a sudden walked over to the Chino Hills kids. And here where God has a sense of humor, I think intended for bad to squelch our praying, only because our kids had called the Chino Hills kids that they were friends with. And he said, let's get together and have both teams have a team prayer. So more kids got to pray at that time than had it just been the Ayala kids, and God was still honored. So
you think about the school situation. Part of the problem with the schools and the teenage suicides and so forth is you take God out of the schools. You took them off the athletic field where we could pray. You took them out of the classroom, and then you wonder why there's so many problems in the school system. It's because God's not present anymore.
I would agree. So then can you guys talk about, I guess, what it means to be, pardon me, what it means to be a Christian man in today's world, and then as that relates to our responsibilities to our families?
Well, for myself, I've been married 45 years, and my wife and I took our vows seriously in sickness and in health. And so I know my responsibility as a Christian man is to lead my household and be an example to my children. And so I do that. And is it tough? It's not as tough anymore because I'm retired. Mm-hmm. My Christian walk is easier now than when I was challenged in the schools, but
less roadblocks, right?
Yeah, less roadblocks, right. I'm probably closer to the Lord now than I've ever been. And just, I wouldn't change a thing. I don't drink because I choose not to. I don't cuss because I choose not to. Yep. I like going to my Sunday school and church. CVCC is a great church, and I wouldn't change a thing. And my kids know how I feel about the Lord, and I'm blessed. This is a Christmas season coming up. You're supposed to be joyful. I'm joyful. Yeah. I know where I'm going to spend eternity.
Right.
I think, man, that popped in my mind when you asked that question is James Dobson. And I think other than Christian coaches that have had a huge influence, I want to back up even further, the men that have been the most influential in my life, certainly my father, I was very blessed with, but then Christian coaches, and then James Dobson. As a Christian psychologist, he forged a lot of my understanding in terms of education and how to deal with kids and understand kids. But I can't tell you for sure which book it is, but I borrowed from him. He says that when he reaches the end of his days, he wants to recall, number one, a loving family, an earnest attempt to serve the God that made him. And I think there was one other in there that, and I thought, what better legacy that you can recall is, to your question, a man of God, and today, certainly a loving family.
Right.
And an earnest attempt to serve the God that made him is the ministry that God has called us to, and impacting the people that our path crosses. Our sphere of influence now as retirees is not as great as it was, but we still have a sphere of influence. And the most immediate one is our family, and how urgent we pray for our family daily.
Right.
Well, for myself, Ben, when I pass away at my funeral, my goal has always been to make sure that the people there know that I'm a Christian man, and there's no skeletons in my closet. I never had any affairs. I didn't have it. So my kids are going to have a hard time trying to find bad things to say about me because I didn't do anything.
So isn't that my job, that when I give you eulogy, I can tell how you taught your offensive lineman to hold?
Right.
We are going to talk about the elephant in the room, aren't we, eventually?
Is that holding?
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
You asked earlier if Bob and I, we went against each other at West Camino. So Bob, help me out. Was it 2002 when Lou left? I can't remember when that was. But Lou Randall resigned as football coach.
Yeah.
And so
That was it. That was where?
At Ayala.
Okay.
He took over after Mark Pasquale went to Damien.
Gotcha.
So Lou resigned, and I'm at a dilemma. When I moved into Chino Hills, I moved into an area at that time was the borders for Ayala was at borders. But when Chino Hills was built, they changed the borders.
Mm-hmm.
So now my kids were going to go to Chino Hills High School. So by Lou resigning, it made it easier. I said to my kids, do you want to come to school with me to Ayala, or do you want to go with your friends to Chino Hills? Well, you know what they're going to say. Go with their friends.
Of course.
So I said, well, shoot, I don't want to get up in the morning, drive my kids to Chino Hills, and come back and try to get through Ayala's traffic. Anybody that tries to go down that road knows that's a nightmare.
It is.
So,
and it was worse back then.
It
was the traffic was worse because that was before they widened Peyton.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really bad.
Okay, so I said, you know what? I'm going to call over to the principal was Jim Moore. He was a counselor at our school at Ayala, so he knew me. So I called up Jim and said, "Do you have any special ed openings?" He took me over. We walked through the classroom they were building for me. He showed me everything, and I said, "Okay." I told my kids, "I'm going to go to school with you," and it's not bad working where your kids go to school because I wasn't going to teach any of your friends. Where Bob might teach some of his kids' friends or whatever.
Okay.
I didn't have to deal with that, so Bob called me up one day. I know it was Easter break. I remember that much because I was home having lunch with my family. And then he disturbed my lunch. So he says, "Why don't you come over and coach with me?" And I said, "Well, you know what? I've already committed to Terry Roach at Chino Hills High School. And I think it's just be better for my family to be able to go to school where my kids go to school." So now we're on opposite ends. So we meet. We go to play each other when he's at Ayala and Chino Hills, and he beat us that year. But then later on, I convinced Bob to come over to Chino Hills.
Wait a minute, what year was that?
We were all juniors, and we played.
That would have been 2000.
The
2003, 2004 year, but the 2003
right.
Season,
We played Ayala. Yes. We played him tough, but we played him over at Ayala. But we only had juniors.
Right.
So
okay.
So we played, but I convinced Bob to follow me over and I convinced Bob to come over. And it was 1 year you were with us at Chino Hills. And it's hard for Bob because it's hard to be at the arch rival school and teach and coach at the arch rival school. But we would have battle. Bob and I would battle. He took pride in his kids and I took pride in my kids.
Sure.
And if anybody that watches football knows that offensive linemen hold every down. So I said, well, if we're going to hold, we're going to do it the way I teach it so you don't get called. Well, you know, we went to the finals 3 times at Ayala, and we hardly ever got called for holding because I taught it legally. Well, I loved it.
Is that an oxymoron?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you say, how can you be a Christian and teach holding? Well, it's, we do it, so I don't know. But Bob and I would battle. We go one-on-ones, and his kids would get upset that we're holding him, and then Bob get at his kids, don't let him get his hands on you. We just battled it out, and at the end, we were good friends. And what we did, what we haven't addressed, Bob, is coin. When Bob came over, we had some other people. We decided to meet as coaches with Nelson Cook. Yeah, Nelson Cook set up this coin, Coaches of Influence.
Lang Stevens got our group going
because
he was friends with Nelson.
Right. So Coaches of Influence.
Coaches of Influence.
COIN.
Yep. Right. So we would meet on Thursdays. I think at first beginning it was Wednesday, but we changed it to Thursday. We meet right before we went to school, but we would pray for each other, and it was really great. The game before the game on Thursday when Ayala was going to play Chino Hills, we'd come into our coaching stuff, hot stuff, and we would battle it out. But our friendship was always strong because we're competitive. We battle it, and at the end, you shake hands and move on. But the Coaches of Influence was very important to be able to have a support group for you going through it. Whether it's you're having a losing season or things aren't going well. You just had a support group, and Bob and I continue today. It's not coin. but we continue to pray and meet on Thursday
They
mornings.
still do it on Thursday mornings.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
Not there. We're the few of the problem, not many, but
Yeah.
we battled it. But we had some great times, and I would chuckle because Bob would get mad at his kids because we were holding so well, and I was pleased because that means they're learning what I'm teaching them.
Well, a little bit more of the backdrop of that story. I came from West Covina to Iowa in the season of '97.
Right.
I'd always coached linebackers, but they already had a linebacker coach. So Mark Pasquarella asked if I'd coach defensive line. So that meant that Scott and I had to do a lot of one-on-one pass rush. And our kids, our defensive linemen would come back, Coach, they're holding. I said, well, yeah, they're going to hold you in a game, so you got to get your hands off them. But they would always complain. And so, of course, taking jabs at Scott. You missed a coach in there right after Mark. Remember, Lang took over for a year, then Lou. And the other part of that story is when Lou left, he left late in the school year. And Ayala went through a coaching search. They asked if Rick Amantorp was also on the Ayala staff, and he had previous head coaching experience. And he asked myself, he being Steve Martin, our athletic director, would we be interested in taking over? Well, we both said no. We just didn't feel like at that point in the career, I was already coaching, head coach of swimming, and I didn't want to continue as two head coaches.
Right.
Anyways, they went through the interview process, and they offered the job, I think, to a couple guys, and both of them, the guys had turned them down. Well, now we're getting close to the start of spring ball. They came back again and asked if either Rick or I would take over, and I told them no a second time. Well, I remember getting a phone call from our principal, Mike Hunkins, and Steve Martin wanted to meet with me up in the athletic director's office, and they said, look, if you take over as a head coach, we'll make it temporary, but we'll allow you to hire a couple extra coaches because we have some openings. And I thought, well, okay, Lord, do you really want me to do this? And so I said yes. And part of that, I thought, because I didn't know Scott was going over to Chino Hills, I thought Scott and Chris Stevens was the other guy that had been on our staff. They could be the offensive coordinators. Rick Amantorp, and one of the guys we hoped to get on our staff, a longtime coach at Roland, was Craig Snyder. They could be the defensive guys, and I could just put the headphones on and act like I knew what I was doing as the head coach, but to kind of orchestrate it. Well, then I found out that Scott was going over to Chino Hills. Chris went back to Ontario Christian, and then became 3 years of just challenging. You got the novelty of the new school, and anyways, we won that first game, but we were supposed to, so it was a no-win situation. The second two games, I think there were only 3 points that separated us in those games. A great rivalry, but it was an interesting era to be a head coach, a challenging era to be a head coach at Ayala.
And for me, it was hard because I had been part of the staff that built Ayala. Mm-hmm. And now to be over at Chino Hills and going against kids that I once coached, or coaches that I knew, it's hard when you go against your arch rival, especially when you make that move. But I knew it was what the Lord it was the best thing for me and my family.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, I want to get into this, Scott. You are dealing with Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
So when were you diagnosed, and can you take us through that?
Right. Okay. First of all, Parkinson's has been in my family. My sister's husband had Parkinson's. He got it at 35, very young age, and had it for 30 years. So I knew about it. But what happened is, one day I was in the C train container that holds the equipment.
Oh, okay.
Big long things.
Yeah.
And I was pulling some things out, and I fell backwards. I thought, man, that was kind of weird. I lost my balance. No big deal. Well, I didn't think anything of it again. So what happened in November of 2018, I went to my doctor's, and he says, gave me about a 5-minute test and says, sir, I think you have Parkinson's. I said, you're full of it. So he says, I'm going to refer you to a neurologist. So I went to the neurologist, and they put me through some tests, and that guy said, you have Parkinson's disease. So he called it idiopathic, not idiot, but it's idiopathic Parkinson's disease. It's a progressive disorder that there's no cure for at this time. It's a Michael J. Fox disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife says, look, you've coached football for 42 years. I don't know how much longer you're going to live, but it's time to give it up. And so, to be honest with you, when I left the neurologist's office, my wife and I both were crying. I mean, I spent my whole life staying in shape, being strong, going to the weight room, not drinking, not smoking.
Right.
I did nothing to bring this on, but now I got something that's progressively going to get worse over time. So with medication, I'm okay. So I've had it for 6 years. And
6 years since your diagnosis.
Since your diagnosis. My wife says, you've had it longer. I said,
well, yeah.
So what was I going to do? Well, I thought back to things my coach once said. When the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Right.
So am I going to sit there and pout and complain and not do anything, or am I going to fight it? So I chose to fight it. So the way I've addressed it is this. Instead of saying, why did you get Parkinson's? I said, why not me? Why not me? 6 out of 100 people have Parkinson's.
Well, you just answered my next question. So
I
was going to ask why have you been afflicted with this disease? But then you answered,
okay,
why not you?
Right, but understand about the disease. If you know one person with Parkinson's, you know one person. All Parkinson's are different.
Okay.
Mine, it happens to be, I see a movement disorder specialist. I see a nutritionist. Mine happens to be movement. My balance, I fall. I fell yesterday. I fall all the time. I try to do what I can. But because I've gotten this disease, it sounds weird, but it's brought me closer to the Lord. The first thing I do in the morning when I wake up is I, dear Lord, please help me to stand upright and not fall today. Please be with me every step. And I've also used it to help others, I think. Bill Durbin, that used to go to our church, his wife Linda's brother had Parkinson's, and she wanted me to talk to him, so I talked to him. The baseball coach at Ayala had Parkinson's, so I've talked to him. So I used to go like you, Ben. I used to go 24/7 when I was younger. And the Lord has said, you need to slow down. Forget you, Lord. And he says, okay, I'm going to make you slow down.
Yeah.
So,
right.
I'm dealing with it. Well, I don't have to worry. If there's not a cure found for me on earth, I will be cured in heaven.
Right.
And so I try to not complain. I try to have a good attitude. It doesn't always work. But I will tell you this. I've been married 45 years. My wife is truly honoring me in sickness and health. And what worries us as men, all of us here, what worries me the most is I don't want to become what's that word? A problem for my wife. I don't want to become a burden to my wife.
Okay.
That's what my greatest fear is, that I will become a burden to my wife. And how does this come about? They don't know. I played football for 12 years. Does it the head hitting with my head? I don't know. Was it sometimes they think it's chemical based? The fertilizer, the lines that they planted with Roundup, the lines they made on the football fields, could that have gotten airborne? I don't know.
Yeah, they used to burn the lines in the grass field first. Then when the grass would die, then you fill it in with the chalk.
Yeah. So
before they started painting everything. Yeah, that's right.
Like I've told Bob before, I said, you know what? I don't ask the Lord why, because I figure maybe when I get to heaven, He'll tell me. But I know my Savior's He gives you only as much as you can handle.
Oh man. Are you reading my notes here?
No, I don't.
Is that what you're doing? He's reading my notes, Bob.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm going to ask you this, and it's for both of you.
Let me say something real quick about that, because I've been able to watch as Scott has dealt with that, and the one word that comes to mind is how courageous he has been. And
I don't know about that.
I agree, but you ask why. And we're told not to, but you forget that even on the cross, Jesus asked why. No. But Dr. Jeremiah, I think it was, it said it's okay to ask why, but the next question, the next word should be what. what, Lord, do you want to do
Right.
with me
Right.
during this? And Scott is answering that every day in his courageous way that he battles Parkinson's.
Well, let me jump on what Bob's talking about. My hardest part was telling my kids,
And why do you think that is?
because my daughter is a Christian gal, but she doesn't understand why Christ gave it to me.
Okay.
And my son, same thing. And I just try to say, look, there's got to be a reason why the Lord did this. One is I'm a home more. And think about what God has done. He gave it to me when I retired. So he didn't force me to quit. My wife was kind of on my case to give up coaching towards the end.
Right.
But I just said, God's going to use me somehow in this. And I want to be an example to my children. But I had to convince her that God didn't turn his back on me. I'm okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Would I rather not have it? Yes, I'd rather not have it. But thank goodness Michael J. Fox got it first and come up with all these different ways to redeem it. And, will I see it? I don't know. But,
Right.
But God only gives you what you can handle.
So,
And I'm so
then, okay, that's the second time you've said that.
But I should have said this. I always prayed to God that I wouldn't get cancer. Next time this has to happen again, I'm going to pray that I don't get Parkinson's, diabetes, cancer.
You're gonna include everything else.
Everything else.
All right. You've said it twice. So what are your thoughts, each of you, on the saying, God never gives you more than you can handle?
Well, for me, God knows my weakness. I'm a warrior. I have a lot of anxiety problems. So God says, I'll just give you a little bit. I'm not going to dump on you like Job.
Right.
So I can handle this. What you have to do to beat Parkinson's, you have to exercise. I do that. They say coffee's okay with Parkinson's. I drink tons of that. So I'm doing the things that it hasn't limited me. I can't work around the house like I used to, like 4 hours be nothing. I can't do that anymore.
Right.
But I still can work, and it's really strengthened my relationship with my wife because I know how much I'm dependent on her. Selfishly, I'm asking the Lord to go first. My wife would do better without me than I would without her.
Yeah.
And so I try to be, and I'm upfront with you guys. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I tell you in Bible study, I have to go take my medicine. I get up and take my medicine. Bob knows some days I don't walk real right, but I'm just battling. But I try not to be angry at God for what he's done, because God knew way beforehand that I was going to have Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
And he waited till I retired.
And he knew that you would be able to deal with it. You would have a handle on it.
Yeah, he knows. I'm not sitting through dialysis 8 hours a day. I'm not going through chemo.
Right.
Because God knows I'm not strong enough to do that.
So God doesn't give you more than you can handle. That's a challenging question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think where I am at this phase of my life and how I would answer that question, those are things I'm struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
You go from, I talked about your venue of influence, sphere of influence when you're teaching and coaching, and to retirement. Retirement's an adjustment.
Sure.
And I think as men, oftentimes we get our self-esteem through our job.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you retire, it's been a long time since now. I retired in 2017, and somebody's called me coach. And the respect that term carries with it.
I think that this has a ring to it. It's just such a ring to it, that word.
Yeah. So I think in looking for our identity in retirement, believing that God still has purpose and plan, no good thing does he withhold from those that walk uprightly, and claiming those promises, also applying those, and this has been the other stretching point, is the things that are the most meaningful to me that I've prayed about are still sitting in God's weight box.
Right.
And the double whammy when we're told to wait, and then the double whammy being wait patiently, and that's a challenge. And so to answer that question, I'm kind of trusting that, okay, God, you don't give me more than I can handle, but there's some things out there that I'm waiting for that I'm obviously not at the tipping point because they haven't been resolved, but there's things that are very challenging right now in this phase of my life.
Yeah. So when you talk about retirement, what happened with myself is my wife was a stay-at-home mom in the 80s. She could do that nowadays. You can't do it. You could do it then. You can't do it nowadays.
Right.
So by her staying home, she was able to take the kids to Bible study fellowship in Whittier. And she's kept coming home at night saying, I love Bible study fellowship. You need to do a Bible study.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm coaching football. When football is over, I was coaching wrestling. When that's over, I was coaching track. I mean, I went all the time. So I told her, I said, man, how am I going to get this woman off my back? So I said, I know what. I'll tell her when I'm retired, I'll start a Bible study or I'll go to a Bible study.
Right.
So lo and behold, 2015, I retired. And about a month later, she gave me about a month. She said,
a whole month.
I know.
30
she
days.
Says, when are you going to start your Bible study? I said, oh, God, she remembered. After 40 years or whatever. Right. So I called up Bob and said, what do you think about starting a Bible study? Thinking Bob's going to say, I'll be the leader. Well, Bob didn't say he's going to be the leader. But he says, okay, sounds good. So we went with you, me, and Roger. We went and met with Jeff Carter at Chino Valley Community Church.
Yeah.
We said, we would like to start. They did not have a morning Bible study. I can't do nights. Nights are not good for me. So I said, well, we like to do it in the morning. He says, what about 6 o'clock before they go to work?
Oh, God.
Or 6:30? I said, well, Jeff, we're retired. We're not gonna get up at 6:30 go to some Bible study. So Bob and I started it with Bill Durbin, Roger, Gwen, you and me, and Glenn wasn't part of it. Phil wasn't part?
I think you said there were about 8 guys to start with.
I think there's only 4, maybe 6.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we started this Bible study.
That he was a former police officer. He didn't last through.
Oh, Mike Preston.
Was that? I forget his name.
So what happened is, the Lord was telling me, you need to start this Bible study, and he was pulling on my shirt, and I had a good shirt on. It was one of these.
Stretched it out, huh?
Well, it's like one of these Walmart shirts, not Costco. So he's pulling on it, and everywhere I went, he was pulling on my saying, start the Bible study, start the Bible study. I said, Lord God, I don't even know enough to start a Bible study. Well, lo and behold, I said, I don't know what, I won't be the leader, but I'll be the facilitator. Don't ask me to spell it, but I'll be it. So I started out, and then Bob was good because I was used to being a teacher and having to have closure. And I try to finish up, and Bob says, slow down.
And Bob does it every week.
But we slowed down. We've slowed down now, huh?
Oh, gosh. We're at snail's pace right now.
So we've have a good problem at our church. We've outgrown the library.
Yeah.
So we moved into the sanctuary. We're at sometimes 20, 21 men. And it gave me a purpose in my life. And like I said, I'm learning more with what Bob covers and what some of the people. I'm like Bill Belichick. I've got great assistants with Frank and Bob and Roger. I got all these great knowledgeable people around me. And, I can't even read the Old Testament names.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah. I'm not afraid to put it. That we needed more Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John.
Yes.
But it's truly been a blessing, and I can't do anything without Christ. And it's been a great group, and we just slowly growing, and it's a quality group, good men.
I'll say, I'm a little ways from retirement. I actually could retire in about 5 years, but I think I'm going to stick around a little longer. But my audience is a little bit aware of my situation, not working the last year, having shoulder surgery and being off. And it's afforded me a lot of good stuff. And it's afforded me week in and week out, spending time with you guys. And it's great. But to what you were talking about, Ed, Bob, and you've mentioned it before, it's, in fact, you were even talking about it earlier this morning about retirement, and you spoke about a TED talk that speaks of what we're to do in retirement, how we're supposed to approach retirement, and those kind of things. And being off this last year has really, at times played with my mind a little bit. It's like, really, is this what retirement's going to be about? Where you can lose yourself a little bit because you're not on a schedule anymore. You have, you're free 7 days a week. And I have found myself like that. The first 3 months I was off, it was beautiful. Physically, I couldn't really do much anyway, but it was like a vacation. But it was after that. And it's like, okay, now where I could start doing things physically again. Now, what do I do? And how do I put this list together, things to do to keep me busy so that, one, I don't drive Catherine insane, and she can't wait till I go back to work. And then two, I'm not just walking around bumping into the walls. So there's a lot to that. And I think we just don't realize it until we reach that moment when we retire, that it's a huge change. Yeah, you don't have to go to work anymore, and you don't have those responsibilities, but boy, your life really changes, and you have to prepare for that.
Yeah, the big thing with retirement now is that you can have morning doctor appointments.
Yeah, there you go.
You can have appointments in the morning that you couldn't do. It's very hard. My first year was difficult. But Bob has encouraged me too I've been reading more Dr. Jeremiah. Seems like every year he has a new book. Okay. Gives me a chance to read more. Bible study. My schedule is Bible study Tuesday night, Bible study Wednesday, and Bible Thursday morning. Yeah. And church Sunday. And my week goes fast. But, but with the illness, it makes me appreciate each day a little bit more, because who knows? But,
that's right.
It's
our former Ayala athletic director, Steve Martin, a good friend and longtime athletic director, and he retired about the time you did, maybe. Anyways, I was talking to him as I thought about it, and he made a comment. He said, for him, retirement was like having been on a treadmill. You're going 100 miles an hour, and then you retire, and you step off, and you stop, and you look around.
Right.
Okay, now what do I do? And it's the answer to that now what do I do question that we as Christians, I think, believe that, okay, Lord, I'm available. The now what do I do is your job. You provide those ministries, and the Wednesday Bible study and Thursday Bible studies have sure filled gaps. Yeah. And I think for me personally, what I've enjoyed the most about teaching is the preparation. Could I put a good history lecture together in a way that the kids were engaged in it, but I liked that preparation. And so certainly to prepare, we're going through 2 Samuel right now, and to look at all the different resources and pull it together in a way that it makes that particular passage understandable to us is what I find fulfilling.
Yeah.
Well, and Scott and I, we talk about it from time to time as we're walking out to the parking lot. There are some great minds in that room. And Scott is the facilitator, but Bob is the teacher.
Yep.
That's just, there's no two ways about it.
I take roll and make sure that we can move along a little bit so we get done with at least 3 or 4 questions.
Well, and the other truth be known, Scott thinks that he's gotten away with teaching holding. What he doesn't realize is his punishment is to go back and, especially in the Old Testament, pronounce all those Hebrew words.
Yes.
God's getting even with me.
All those names.
God's getting even with me.
Yeah. Oh, my.
But, my goal, you don't know this yet. Okay. My goal is, because I have a progressive disorder, I'm hoping, Ben, that when you retire, I can pass the torch to you. I still want to come, but I don't know how I'll be as far as reading and writing and so forth. And it would be nice to be able to pass the torch. Just like the one regret Bob and I have with the coin group is there's nobody to pass the torch to. There's nobody young that we can pass the torch to.
And that was, to kind of build on that, such a blessing that when we first started back in 97, and we would meet before school. We'd meet at 6:15. We had to be done by 6:45, otherwise, because at that point, Ayala was the only high school in town, and you got almost 4,000 kids, and you want to be there on drop-off time. So we had a half hour to kind of talk to each other briefly, jump into whatever the study was. We rotate whatever topic that person was led to lead, and then we do prayer requests, and then we had to jet out of there.
Yeah.
So maybe, again, thinking about the benefits of retirement, we moved to Bravo Burger. There's a plug for Bravo.
There's a plug,
great place. Greatest waitress in town. We have Angela that takes care of us. But now we meet at 7:00, and we talk a little bit, and then we jump into the study, and then we talk about the study, and we share prayer requests, and we do promise verses, and it's just such a blessing in our lives. And we can eat breakfast afterwards because we don't have to rush off to school.
Right. It's encouraging to know that, like in my Sunday school group, it's encouraging to know that you have people that are praying for you.
Absolutely. That you're not in it alone.
No.
And you shouldn't. You shouldn't live a Christian life alone.
Mm.
You need to have people around you that, one, hold you accountable, and two, lift you up as well when you need a little lifting, but also can give you a swat on the behind if you need it. Yeah.
Well, you think about current events and the things that are going on, certainly spin-off of Zoom and trying to shut down the churches, but where is this all headed? And I'm not so sure, but maybe we go back to the original church. Remember, they met in people's homes.
Right.
In the intimacy of a small group and being able to have a study, but to talk back and forth and share ideas. What a blessing that is. And so certainly Wednesday and Thursday have been that. But is that the future of the church as we move forward? I don't know.
I don't know.
We're living in crazy times.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this, guys. I consider you both to be not only friends, not only brothers in Christ, but I consider you to be mentors. It has been an absolute pleasure to spend Wednesday mornings with you. It truly has. I can't say enough about it. And I'm, to you out there listening, to the audience, I have to say this about these two guys here. They are a throwback to when men were men. And, that's all I'm going to say about that. These guys are a joy to be around. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you come into the studio and do this with me. I know you guys are like, well, okay, well, we'll do it. Yeah, well, and then of course, Bob being the teacher, what are you going to talk about, Ben? Just send me some notes here. I need to know what's going on before I walk in. So I so appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
I really, really do. It means the world to me. And I can't say thanks enough.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And to even have the credibility that anybody would want to listen to us.
Well, I do.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you having us.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've fit it into our busy schedules.
Yes, that's right. So with that, everyone, this is going to be a wrap. Again, the show is available on multiple podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Or you can simply just search the Ben Maynard Program. Lots of options to choose from. Of course, I want to steer you towards Buzzsprout. So pick your option. If you're watching on YouTube, ask that you please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. Oh, and give me a thumbs up too. Last but not least, follow me on Instagram. Simply Ben Maynard Program. And with that, we're done. Thank you so much for being here. This is the Ben Maynard Program. Tell a friend.